right. Hello. Welcome, Joe, to the Social Video Playbook.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I am so excited you're here. For everybody that is tuning in, welcome to you all as well to the Social Video Playbook. This is our space for the next 15 minutes where we're going to talk about all things social video, all the yays, all the nays, what's going well and what's not going well. Our whole goal is to give you fast insights into what real leaders across various spaces, from insights to creators to brands to CMOs, CEOs, etc., who are leading the charge in understanding how social video is affecting the bottom line of companies and businesses across the world. So understanding how you're going to digest all this data, what is it that you can do to improve or change some of your social media strategy, and how does video play a part in that? I'm Elizabeth. I'm head of growth at Viral Moment. I'm also clearly the host of the Social Video Playbook. And here with me today is Joe Sayers. Joe, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm currently Sports Insight Director at Signify AI. We are a company we're a data science company. Two sides to our business. We do abuse monitoring with sports teams, leagues, organizations, where we look after players, athletes, officials, high profile people in regards to online abuse. The other side of the business that I'm kind of looking after and building is the sports insights. And so how can we help our existing clients and then new business with understanding fans on a deeper level, and how they can ultimately speak to fans and engage fans in a better way, and just ultimately understand their audience in more detail. I joined in September last year. 6 years previous to that, I was at Manchester United. I looked after the social listening and insight there. And then the 6 years previous to that, I was at HSBC doing social listening and analytics. So I've been doing this for far too long now. 2012 was when I first started, and the landscape has changed significantly in that time.
Good. Well, I'm happy to hear you have a vast background going across this, because social video has been coming fast. So you've seen the whole breadth of. I also love to hear that like Man U has a social listening team. Like there's some big, like huge global brands that don't even have social listening teams. And Manchester United's like, no, we've got to hear what our fans are saying. And I love that.
I very much leveraged that into a role myself. I was taken on as a digital media analyst and actually managed to carve social listening as a kind of focus, but it spoke to the people running the club at the time that they really cared about understanding the fans and everything, right? So that's why it became the role that it did. So yeah, very lucky. But you are essentially looking at the team for quite some time. It was a one-man band for a while, but yeah, very, very good that brands like that care.
Yeah, I love that. And it's probably why they're so recognized, globally versus just within the more fanatic soccer countries, which US is getting there, but like slowly but surely. As a soccer player myself, I would love for us to go further.
They've come a long way, come an awful long way. I think America's underrated when it comes to their interest and knowledge around our football, not soccer.
Yeah, football with the U.
Yeah.
Well, let's hop in, Joe. You've seen a lot happening in the space over the 12 plus years that you've been working across insights and research. What is the number one shift that you've seen in your industry that you just think, brands just haven't been ready for?
Yeah, I think specifically in sport, I think there's so many options and so many places for fans to engage, talk about their favorite teams and the things that they care about. I think just who you are is no longer enough on social. So a brand like Manchester United can't just sit there and go, well, we're Man United, so people will come to us, because there's so many different places to go now for fans. There's so many different networks. There's so many different communities within that brands ultimately have to be giving people constantly a reason to want to engage and to actually care, to keep coming back. And I think a lot of brands are still quite slow to actually realize that fact, that the options are just so vast now.
Yeah. How do you think that social video has been changing the way that brands, are making decisions or have made decisions?
Yeah, I think it can fuel everything. I think social video can fuel marketing campaigns. It can help content strategy, comms. It can help kind of your overall voice, everything. I think social video is not just an opportunity for brands to tell stories. I think it's a window into that brand, right? And so social video unlocks a lot of opportunities for brands in terms of just being able, that authentic connection, that thing that we know is so vital when it comes to engagement and community building, and social video really allows that. And I think the brands who do that well are the ones that ultimately are using it not just as a vehicle to activate and engage an audience, right, but also to actually tell stories and build that meaningful connection.
Yeah. And social video is vast. So it kind of brings us to our next session too. Like with just Twitter, just kind of the text world that we used to live in only a handful of years ago now, it was like, here's this 120 character sentence, and that's what we have to go on, right? But with social video, there's so much more that goes with it. There's a transcription, the background, audio, the blah. Like, I mean, the production itself is like a whole thing. So I'm wondering, as somebody that has to like sift through not only some of the tech stuff, but also a lot of the video stuff in your role as well to start to understand this, what are some of the biggest challenges across social video that you're experiencing right now?
You touched on the biggest challenge, the scale of it. The volume is vast and ever growing, and so you can analyze a lot of text content very quickly, right? With tools and the capabilities now, but being able to really understand conversations and fan channels and podcasts, and all of them now have video as a huge part of their strategy. And the biggest challenge is keeping on top of it all, because it changes so quick. And you can go to bed and wake up the next day and the narrative has shifted completely because of a number of videos or stories or whatever it might be. So the single biggest challenge is just dealing with the scale of it. And unfortunately, that's not an easy challenge.
Are there, with the challenge of the scale, how are you trying to address it?
Yeah, outside of kind of sitting in a corner and crying all day, I think it's ultimately finding tools that help bring kind of this data in, effectively using AI where possible as well. It's kind of, I think within this industry, the one thing I've always found is you just can't stand still. You can't do the same process that you've always done, because everything evolves. So you've got to constantly keep on top of new tools, new capabilities, new ways of working. And ultimately, that's the only way really to tackle this, right? Is you've just got to get stuck into it. I think with anything, there's always an element of human expertise that's needed. You still need to be able to actually take all of that information and put it in a way that's going to work internally or whoever you're working with. But being across the latest developments in terms of being able to analyze that data is pretty much the only way to try and tackle it. Otherwise, you've got no chance.
Yeah, if you could have anything in the world, and it doesn't even have to exist yet, you could like make it up to help you solve like some of these challenges, like unlimited resources, what is it that you would pick to just like solve this problem for you so you could go and, be better in your zone of genius and do the thing that matters?
Yeah, I think ultimately with this, resources is always the thing, and that's either financial, time, or people, right? And so I think one way you could do it is, if you had financial wasn't a burden, I would just get all of the data possible that I could, and within one place know that I've got all the data. But
Mhm.
thinking about it, I actually wouldn't want to do that. I think the better way to do it is just to build the best tech stack that you can. And so if money was no option, I would have a tech stack that had tools with capabilities where they were experts in a specific thing. I wouldn't necessarily want a tool that covers everything and just have one. I think tech stacks are the best way to do it. So as much as I'd love to build an evil empire and own all the data, I actually wouldn't. I would rather do the tech stack, because then you work with more people, you take on more ideas, and I think that is a far better way to tackle it. And so the biggest restraint is so often financial. If that wasn't the issue, my tech stack would be kind of involving an awful lot of people and suppliers, for sure.
You're like one of everyone.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly, one of everything.
Absolutely. Shifting gears a little bit away from kind of, the issues we're running into with trying to understand and measure. Sorry, let me think about how I'm going to say this. Understand and measure the social video world that we live in now. You work with a lot of brands, you work with a lot of sports companies. What's some common mistakes that you're seeing that people are looking at or using when interpreting the social video?
Yeah, I think, and I know a couple of people have already touched on this on previous episodes, but I think analyzing the wrong thing or looking at the wrong metrics and video views, I'll give as an example. Now, video views have a part to play in it, but I do think there can be some misunderstanding if you're analyzing video just on the amount of views that it got. In the
Mhm.
same way that picking an influencer to work with because they have the most followers is not the right way to go about that process, right? It's one part of a story. And I think some of the issues is sometimes these videos had huge amount of views, so therefore they have to be really influential within our audience. It's not always the case, right? It's not always just your audience watching a video. People don't watch a video because they love it. People don't even review a video because they loved it. There's a whole host of reasons why. And so I say it all the time, but you've got to be able to put stuff into context. And sometimes I think if you focus just on one or two metrics or only focus on those and not worry about anything else, you're kind of missing the context. And I think that's the key thing for me.
Do you think that there's specific metrics that brands should actually be measuring, or are there other more important factors when it comes to understanding social video that brands should be focusing on?
Yeah, I think obviously all of them play a part, but something like if we take likes for an example, I think people are so used to liking stuff that I've seen people flicking through feeds and just double tapping just instant, and they're not even looking at the content, right? It's so natural. So I actually think I actually think the meaningful engagement side of things are where you really start to understand, because if you create a piece of content and someone is compelled enough to either take it and put it on their own feed, or even better, take it and move it into WhatsApp or direct messages and start telling friends, look, have you seen this? Or this is great, or whatever it might be. That is a far more powerful indication of how good that content is. And I think with sports teams as well, if you can create incredible content, but if the team is not winning at the time that post goes live, it will not do as well as if the team was winning. And if you're only looking at views, you can suddenly find yourself out of a job because people will just be like, this is not performing well enough. But when you start to understand the layer behind it, and I think shares, and I also think understanding with brands, when you're telling these stories, when you're talking about your club, or when you're talking about kind of what it is to be a fan of that club, and those stories, are those stories actually traveling? Are we seeing other people start to talk about that in the same way, using some of those words, using some of that stuff? That for me is an indication that your video and your social video strategy is actually working above and beyond how many views has it had in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, what did you put out, and did it kind of templatize itself?
Absolutely, yeah, and and again, this goes back to the point. There's so many different places for people to go and talk about stuff, but actually, have you held their attention, or have you made them think about something, or reminisce about something, or with the stories that you're telling, that's led them to start talking about it elsewhere? And that kind of narrative stuff is really, really powerful, and social video plays an absolutely vital role in that.
Yeah. And this next question might be a bit of the same, but maybe you have a different take. You work with a lot of leaders from a lot a lot of different spaces. What is an underrated insight that you push leaders in your field to think on and act on now?
Yeah, I think community is a big thing, and we all know that. And community and community building has become even bigger since COVID than it was before. But I actually think it's niche communities that is the real important part, because so often, particularly in football in this country, we like to say football family, and we like to say that if you're a fan of the club, you're part of the family. But it's it's so much more niche than that. So just because you're a fan of the club doesn't mean I'm the same as any other fan, or we are all one mass of people, right? So it's the niche communities within, I think, that's really important to understand, to engage, to speak to, and ultimately grow, because those communities are the real passionate ones, right? And so really understanding those and how they intertwine and what the differences are, I think it's really, really crucial that you don't just look at your audience as one group. You really understand the niche communities within, and then you can have huge success with campaigns and stories when you start to activate different ones at different times and don't necessarily try and go after everyone all at once.
Yeah, and that's so true. I mean, just because you like Manchester United doesn't mean that the person next to you who also likes Manchester United has anything else in
Absolutely
common
not.
with you.
Yeah, exactly. And particularly if you're dealing with a huge global brand, then your audience is incredibly diverse. And so it's really important to understand that. But the same applies when you're growing an audience. If you're a smaller brand or an athlete starting out, really understanding your audience, and there will still be niche communities within it, is really important to ultimately being able to speak to them in the right way, I think. So for me, I think that's one of the most underrated pieces of insight is niche communities.
Yeah, I love that. Is there when you're working with these leaders or anybody else that you're kind of sharing your social video thoughts and strategies on, is there an assumption that comes up about social video that just is completely wrong and you're like, like, hold on, I need to reframe your thinking around this?
Yeah, I think sometimes there's a belief, and I guess this is less around the actual brand itself and perhaps more related to when you start to look at people creating who are using social video fan groups or channels or influencers or whatever. The, the idea that then they don't know what they're doing and they're just talking about stuff and they're not really, there's kind of this sense of, well, we don't really need to listen to them, or we don't really need to kind of take on board what they're saying. A lot of these content creators and influencers are unbelievably skilled, and I think Gigi touched on it right in the first episode. Right, it's not just putting a camera up and recording. There's all of the editing, there's all of the production, there's all of everything that goes into it. And so sometimes I think, and I'm specifically talking not the way that brands look at it, because they obviously know the importance, but I do think sometimes people can dismiss other creators or other areas where social video is really strong under this guise of, well, they're just people in their rooms talking, and they're not really, we don't really need to take kind of too much listen to what they're saying.
Yeah, but people in the rooms talking are the ones the ones that tend to just suddenly go viral and you're like, "Oh, your opinion was very well received." Like,
And they are the best at building their communities. They
mm,
are the best. You can learn so much from that as well. So I don't know if there's if kind of being a bit snobby is the right way to phrase it, but sometimes it's a bit like, well, we're brands, we're doing all of this proper video work, and so our stuff should be far more important than that, and that's just not how the world works. It's definitely not how social media works in 2025.
yeah, no, it always makes me think about Don Draper in Mad Men, and like, what used to happen. Brands did have control. They did have
Yeah,
the story they could tell.
yeah.
This is what ketchup is going to say to you as the consumer, but it's reversed now, and you're really touching into that. And it's like, no, like the consumer is telling you what matters, not the brand telling the consumer.
But yeah, don't even get me started on the importance of controlling narrative and understanding all of that, because that's a different podcast in itself. But 100%, that is exactly it. And particularly I think it happens everywhere, but particularly in sports, it moves so fast. There's so much content. There's so many games. It never stops. So those narratives, you can lose control of those so quickly.
So fast. Yeah, we could go down a whole rabbit hole. Maybe that's the next season we do is like narrative restructuring.
That's going to have to be like a 3 hour long podcast, though. So I don't know if anyone would want to watch that.
Joe Rogan style, just
Yeah,
endless
exactly.
podcasts. Earlier, me, I'm one person here. I asked you if you could get anything in the world, but I kind of want to limit you down based on, what we've talked about and some of the pain points you're feeling and some of the conversations you have to have constantly to win these strategies and put out the best foot forward for the brand. If you were to get one thing in 2025, so it already exists, that would make just your business easier, like what would that one thing be?
If I could get one thing, I would say, give me one opportunity to speak to the people who make decisions in the business around why it is important to understand this stuff to the level at which you can, with the right insight and analysis. Because I think sometimes the challenge, And I'm very much speaking on the agency side of the fence where I work now, as opposed to when I was embedded in a club. But I even think it's the same then. The opportunity to speak to the right people is vital, because as soon as they understand it, they see the value in it and the importance in it. If I could have one thing, it would be any brand or any team or anyone that I'm trying to speak to, give me 20 minutes with the people who make the decision, and we can sell the value of why you should really care about it.
Yeah, we'll show them this episode.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hopefully. If that doesn't work, give me another 20 minutes and we'll see what we do.
I love it. It's true though. If you do win at the leadership level, and then the budget comes through, and then you can get those tools that you want, so you can go deeper and come up with better strategies, and you can watch it really succeed across social. You see that happen a lot.
Yeah, and I think you only know what you know, and I think sometimes it's not through people not wanting to do it. It's sometimes just understanding exactly why this stuff or how this all fits together. And I think when you do, and the brands who do understand that, you can tell it with their content and their messaging and everything, because it's all kind of linked and all really important.
Yeah. Well, I have one bonus question for you. It's a pretty easy one, so don't get too concerned here, but you've done a lot. You've come up in the past 12 plus years. You've worked for some amazing clubs and brands, and you're continuing to do that forward. Is there a lesson that you've learned from navigating this space that you wish more people understood, or advice for anybody that's just like, I want to do what Joe does? Like, how do I do this?
Yeah, I guess kind of two. They're kind of linked. I think the first one is never stop evolving. I think you've got to, because social media never stops, right? And so always look at new ideas, always think about things in different ways. Don't be afraid to kind of tear things down and start again, make mistakes. I think that's a really important part when you're doing analysis, is kind of not just being so stuck in your ways. And a kind of a bolt on of that is reaching out and having that community that I've found my LinkedIn game needs an awful lot of work, but I've certainly found in the last kind of couple of years that actually reaching out to people within your industry and sharing those ideas and just having conversations around the stuff that you'll work on can really open up new ideas, new ways of working. And sometimes it's something so simple that you've just not even thought of it in that way. So if I look at the way that I did stuff when I first started to now, the biggest shift has just been, just don't be afraid to just keep evolving and keep changing. It doesn't always have to be the same way, and it doesn't work that way either, because every brief, every piece of work that you're doing is different. And so therefore that would be my biggest piece of advice.
I love that. You evolve the same way that social media evolves, and now we're in social video, and who knows what 2026 is going to be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, who knows what's coming, but yeah, constantly evolving is the best way to be. And I think never be afraid of taking on new ideas and new ways of kind of thinking as well.
Yeah. Well, Joe, we are at time. This has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. For anybody that's watching, Joe can be found on LinkedIn. It is scrolling. It's also going to be dropped in the show notes if you're listening on Spotify or just listening in the background on LinkedIn or YouTube. So follow Joe on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for coming today. We really appreciate it. I can't wait to share these out.
Lovely. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. And thank you for anyone who's still listening.
Have a good one.